If you want to attract opportunities, get the recognition you deserve, and actually stay out of petty office politics, you need to detach at work. In this video, I'm going to teach you exactly how to ditch your desperate, insecure vibes and step into your detached, confident energy. We'll learn what detachment is, how it will improve your career and life, and the simple process to detach at work. Let's begin with the obvious. What is detachment? The simplest definition of detachment is it's your ability to separate yourself from a situation. When you are detached, you are objective about how you approach a situation. You are not desperate for a particular outcome, and you are not bothered by whatever happens next. When you're detached, you recognize that you don't have to absorb the negativity, the judgment, or the drama that happens around you. The perfect embodied example of detached is Samantha Jones in Sex and the City. Throughout the series, we see that Samantha is a securely attached individual with a strong self-identity that is unfazed by other people's opinions and judgments. We rarely see Samantha overly attached to a person, career objective, or money. In the few instances where we do see it, we see her very quickly reset that dynamic to her standard. On the other hand, we have Carrie, who is anxiously attached. She chases the men she dates, the fashion she wears, and approval from others. When opportunities come her way, she brings a desperate energy to them. A very relevant example of that is when she lands a job at Vogue as a freelance writer. She is so anxious to gain approval, she fumbles the first impressions and ends up like this.
Drunk at Vogue.
Which probably brings you to the question, why should I detach? The reason is simple. There are so many benefits to ditching anxious attachment and the desperate energy that comes with it. Let's start with the most obvious benefit. When you're detached at work, you have so much less stress. Detached people are not bothered by something their toxic coworker said or did, the latest fire drill in a project, or the unfair criticism from their jerk boss. Just like how they don't let praise and recognition go to their head either. Being detached allows you to be emotionally regulated in any situation. And when things are intense, it allows you to leave stress at the door. We see the stress Carrie's anxious attachment causes her. The series is literally centered on her complaining to her friends, overanalyzing situations, and letting people live in her head rent-free. While Samantha has her moments, we don't typically see her scrutinizing conversations or stressing out about work. For example, there's an episode of Sex and the City where Samantha's assistant quits and starts her own PR firm, landing a big Hamptons party Samantha had pitched. Of course, things go sideways, and an expensive fireworks show starts hours early. Her assistant is on the verge of a complete mentee bee, and she begs Samantha to help her. Samantha calmly steps in, takes charge, and gets people where they need to go. Okay, and she gets a little bit of petty revenge too. This scene also perfectly demonstrates the second benefit of detachment, better decision making. Have you ever been in a situation at work where your boss or a more senior leader is making emotionally driven decisions and you know the direction they're taking you in as a downward spiral? After helping thousands of people through toxic workplaces, one of the most common themes I see is emotionally driven, toxic leadership, where decisions are feeding individual ego and not employee or long-term business outcomes. When you are detached, you're able to see the forest through the trees. You're able to step back and be objective about how to solve a problem, whether it's time to quit your job, and what work to focus on instead of firefighting. As we saw in that Hamptons party scene, detachment also enables you to remain and project confidence. Samantha's assistant is firmly in desperate energy. Not only does this leave her unable to fix a problem, she can't influence others. Samantha's confidence is what allows her to command the room. It's why everyone in the room does exactly what she says without question. Which brings me directly to the third benefit of detachment. Throughout Sex and the City's work-life boundaries are blurry, both for Carrie and for Samantha. Of course, Carrie's personal life is her career. She writes a relationship column based on her romantic relationships and the romantic relationships of her friends. We also see Samantha mixing business and pleasure repeatedly throughout the series, from casual encounters with her realtor to committed relationships like with Richard Wright and Smith Jared. Yet Samantha's detachment enables her to maintain clear boundaries even when the water is muddy. She unapologetically prioritizes her boundaries and herself. Frankly, I think the series does her a bit dirty in having strong boundaries where her friends don't. Under patriarchal structures, we're supposed to hate ourselves and prioritize everyone else. Samantha disrupts that standard. On the other hand, we see Carrie's anxious attachment bulldozing boundaries, sometimes in the most unhinged ways. Like the time that she crashed church to meet Big's mom, and let's not forget how she stalked Natasha. multiple times. There is one more major benefit of detachment, and this one will make you richer, more successful, and happier in every area of your life. The episode where Carrie runs the math and realizes she has spent $40,000 in shoes but has nothing in her bank account is the perfect example of this type of detachment. With her building going co-op and the audacity of market rate rents in New York City even back then, Carrie is faced with her dire financial situation. She scrambles. Of course, she's the main character of the show, so she lands a high-paying gig at Vogue. She asks her financier ex-boyfriend for help and expects her friends to lend her money. There's one conversation in particular that perfectly encapsulates how Samantha's detachment allows her to have an abundant mindset about money in addition to work, love, and everything else.
Needs it, you give it. You need it, you take it.
Samantha's detachment allows things to flow easily. In the series, we see this time and again. Her PR firm is thriving. She gets an apartment in an up-and-coming neighborhood, and men are plentiful in her life. Of course, the series is from Carrie's POV, so we see her projection as a glamorous writer. However, Carrie is not a reliable narrator. There are several indicators of the truth. Her column is known, but not necessarily well regarded. In the eyes of the New York society she wants to fit in with, she's not elegant, and that's the nicest way I could say that. And of course, we see her struggling financially. And even her book deal, which is the holy grail for an author, isn't the career breakthrough she wants it to be. In the real world, the scarcity that anxious attachment creates keeps people stuck in dead-end and toxic jobs, accepting bad job offers, and struggling. Being detached enables you to remain open to opportunities, to walk away from bad and toxic situations at work, and ultimately, to trust that the universe has your back. I know you're thinking, this all sounds great, and Samantha really is the best character. But before we get into how to detach, there is one more thing we need to talk about, because if you don't know this, you will struggle to detach at work or anywhere else in your life. In the examples that I've given, you probably noticed something. Detachment comes in different forms. There are 3 different types of detachment. The first is the one that most people think of when they hear detachment, and it's definitely the one that we think of when we think about Carrie, and that is emotional. Carrie is overly emotionally attached to everything in her life. Her apartment, her clothes, and of course her romantic partners. Her emotional attachment drives her to, you guessed it, emotional reactions. In the episode I mentioned earlier where she expects her friends to loan her money, Charlotte's failure to offer her a loan enrages Carrie. She shows up at Charlotte's apartment unannounced to confront her about it. Carrie even acknowledges her money messiness and the lengthy amount of time it would take her to pay it back in that confrontation. And if you've ever lent someone money, you know it's not coming back. In addition to this being an example of the lack of boundaries that Carrie has, it also reflects her emotionality. On the other hand, Samantha maintains generally emotionally detached relationships. Obviously, this is a prevalent theme in her romantic encounters throughout the series, but in general, we see Samantha maintain her composure even when we know she's losing her shit internally. We also don't see her carrying work stress and complaining about the demands of her very demanding job. Her very ethos is to be unbothered. The next type of detachment is one that we see driving much of Carrie's actions, while it's obvious Samantha doesn't give a fuck. Let's go back to what drove Carrie to get drunk at her first day at Vogue. She has an obvious need for approval from others. She had an idea of what someone who works for Vogue is like, and this image triggers her sense of inadequacy, which makes her seek an escape. We also see both her approval seeking and internalized inferiority repeatedly throughout her romantic partnerships. With Aiden, she learns how to be a dog-loving country girl. With Big, she tries to blend in with high society. With Alexander Petrovsky, she tries to become a chic Parisian. On the other hand, Samantha's detachment not only makes her uninterested in the opinions of others, she doesn't seek approval from anyone, even those closest to her. This is evident in the scene where Richard is interviewing her for that PR contract at his hotel chain. In the interview, he unfairly holds her personal life against her, but she doesn't stand for it. She calls out the double standard. We know Samantha wants that contract, but she maintains a willingness to walk away. In the scene that I just mentioned, we as the viewers know how that exchange does impact her in the moment, but she maintains a detached presence instead of slipping into desperation, and that is what ends up landing her the opportunity. Which brings us directly to the third type of detachment, and this one is particularly relevant if you're in a toxic work environment or dealing with a difficult boss or coworker. This type of detachment is the one that we see Carrie struggle with the most, and that is situational attachment. Samantha is quick to walk away from toxic people and toxic situations. Even in situations where we know Samantha has a strong emotional attachment, like in her relationship with Richard, Carrie, on the other hand, well, the series is almost exclusively dedicated to her chasing after toxic men who do not value her. When situations turn toxic, Carrie's anxious attachment goes into overdrive. Instead of walking away, she chases. I know a ton of my career besties have tolerated toxic situations at work and beyond, and a massive benefit of detachment is being willing and able to walk away from these situations without sustaining a massive amount of damage. And even if you have been through a toxic dynamic and tolerated it for a minute, like Samantha did with her relationship with Richard, it does not mean that you need to tolerate it in the future. So let's get into the 3 steps that you can take to actually detach from work. The first step to detach at work is something that I have talked about a ton on my channel. In fact, I have a whole video about it. You need to detach your identity from your job. If your self-concept, self-worth, and self-confidence is all derived from external forces, you are fucked. More specifically, there is an overarching normalization of your professional self becoming who you are. People choose career paths and companies and construct entire identities around it. It runs so deep that people can't detach from those identities even when they no longer exist. Just search ex-Google or ex-Meta on LinkedIn and see how many people define themselves by their former employer. In Sex and the City, Carrie's identity is based on her being a New York City writer. What's interesting is in season 6, when she follows the Russian to Paris, that identity is dismantled and she is lost. There is an entire montage dedicated to her loss of self as she's no longer a writer and no longer a New Yorker. We see her desperation to assert her identity through her appearance and binge shopping at Dior, which low-key I'm jealous about. When Carrie does get a tiny semblance of recognition of her previous identity, when she's recognized in that Parisian bookstore, we see her shift. Their validation was necessary to her identity and her sense of self. Even at the end, she needs external validation in order to take back control of her life. Carrie's weak self-concept is strongly exposed by Samantha's. We all know that many aspects of the show are extremely problematic. For a show that was supposed to be sex positive and push the envelope, Samantha's lifestyle and life choices were portrayed with a lot of shame. Samantha is judged by her neighbors, society, and even by her friends. This isn't to say that it was always easy or that she's always unbothered by others' judgment, but through it all, we see Samantha's strong sense of self and her detachment from the standards and opinions of others. She is able to detach because she knows who she is, what is important, and what she wants. And she knows she doesn't have to apologize for it. Samantha has an incredible sense of self and her goals in both her personal and professional life, which we will come back to because she did not achieve that by accident. But first, we need to talk about the second step to detach. Without this step, detachment is impossible. Yet, I never seen it being discussed, at least not in this context. Have you ever been in a situation at work where a coworker took credit for an idea or threw you under a bus for something that wasn't your fault? How did you feel in that situation? A lot of people that I speak with feel powerless. If they speak up or push back, they feel like their coworker will get away with their behavior, but they will be judged for standing up for themselves. Sometimes this is because when they have spoken up, it has cost them. Harsh truth you need to hear alert. If you have a coworker who is getting away with bad behavior, it is because they have established more power and more influence than you have. And I'm not saying that to call you out. I'm saying it so that you can do something about it. You are not alone in experiencing imbalances of power at work. Our society and economy is literally built on power inequity. In Sex and the City, we know Carrie is not a person in a position of power. She wants to be a mover and shaker, but she's intimidated by and defers to people in power positions. Whether it's dealing with the unit of Vogue or how she navigates her relationships with Big, throughout the series we see her both being unaware of her power and quick to give it away. And have you ever been guilty of that? Samantha, on the other hand, knows her power and she plays her chips. We see this in the very first episode of the series. While Carrie meets Big first, Samantha's the first one to pursue him. She is not intimidated by his power position. In fact, she sees herself as his equal. While I don't think it's immediately apparent, we increasingly see Carrie's sense of inferiority. She gives him complete control in their relationship, even though it's incredibly frustrating for her. Samantha, on the other hand, is very clear on her power. She exchanges both on the socially accepted and taboo power levels she possesses to get what she wants. Knowing and owning your power at work are game changers. This, in my opinion, is what enables you to actually detach at work. You are immune to other people's BS when you have the same or more power and influence when they do. And when you put yourself into that power position, you are unafraid of bad behavior because your vibe becomes, try me. This is one of the reasons why I talk about office politics so much. So many people think office politics are dirty tactics and drama that they have to deal with, but that's not what office politics are. That's just the approach that people with weak power use. Office politics are about owning your power and establishing your reputation, relationships, and influence at work. Of course, I need to shamelessly plug my upcoming workshop, Power Moves Mastery here. This workshop is a must attend and it always sells out. It's going to help you establish a powerful mindset, escape the drama at work, and learn the the 7 power moves to know and own your power at work. You can learn more and register at powermovesmastery.com. Now, there is one more step to detaching at work, and this is one that won't just help you at work, it's going to help you in every realm of your life. It had actually been a few years since I rewatched the whole series. So a couple months ago, I decided to rewatch starting at season 1, episode 1. And there was something that was undeniable while I was watching it, and I feel like no one talks about it. Throughout the series, we get clues about Carrie's dysfunctional family dynamics. For instance, on that First Day at Vogue episode, we learned that Carrie's father abandoned her when she was a child. We could psychoanalyze this as the origin of her anxious attachment and desperation for approval. However, I digress. We also see how Carrie's wounds and insecurities linger. She never really gets over her exes, at least not the significant ones. And we see the insecurities from her past relationships being brought into her present ones. While I would kill for Carrie's closet, I personally don't aspire to her attachment or emotional maturity level. I think that there are a lot of wounds that rule her life. She doesn't take a real effort to heal or grow. And later in the series, the movies, and even the new series, she hasn't really evolved or healed. But what actually did strike me the most when I did that recent rewatch is how healed Samantha is. Her detachment reflects her emotional and psychological growth. She knows detachment doesn't mean that you walk through life not caring about anyone or anything. Quite the contrary. Instead, she has strong boundaries. She values herself, and she makes decisions that align with her priorities, even when that means disappointing someone else. When we process and heal the trauma we experience in life, we liberate ourselves to live on our terms without giving a fuck what anyone thinks. I know that this is something that so many of you are working towards, but you struggle with knowing how to do it. So I want you to go watch this video next, where I lay out a simple process to do just that. I will see you there.